Welcome to the second lecture of module 6 of this course, Game Theory and Economics. This is going to be our last lecture of this entire course. So, what we shall do is to start off this last module, and after we have ended with the lecture and discussion of this module, we shall do a brief stock taking of what we have discussed in this entire course. So, if you remember in the last lecture, we have been discussing a game which is a variation of the ultimatum game, which is known as the hold up game. So, in this hold up game, what happens is that first player 2 moves, then player 1 moves, and then again player 2 moves. And what does player 2 do in the beginning of the game? Well, player 2 can do either of two things. Player 2 can either exert little effort, so which we shall call effort E. E could be less. If he exerts very little effort, less effort, then the size of the pie is small. Let us call it CL. CL is the total size of the pie. And otherwise, E could be high, which means he is exerting high effort, in which case the size of the pie is going to be large. Okay. Let us call it CH. Now, after player 2 has decided his effort level, that decides the size of the pie, then in the second stage, the ultimatum game that we have discussed before starts, which means that after that player 1 makes an offer to player 2, which is an X, and after that player 2 decides whether to accept that offer. If he accepts the offer, he gets X, and if he rejects the offer, both of the players get 0. So, this is the game in short. Question is, what is the Nash equilibrium, what is the subgame perfect Nash equilibrium in this game, where I have added a further step in the beginning of the game itself. To answer that, let us look at the game in terms of the game tree. So, 2 is starting the game and there are two kinds of action that he can take, either L or H. Then player 1 moves, he can make an X offer in either of these two cases, and then again player 2 moves, he can either say yes or he can say no, and then the game terminates. So, what are the payoffs in the terminal histories? If L is the effort chosen by player 2 in the beginning, then the size of the pie is CL. In that case, if player 2 accepts the offer, he gets X and player 1 gets CL minus X. And there is one thing further, player 2 has already made an effort L, and which has cost him some effort, and that is why I have to subtract that from that X that he is getting right now. So, it is X minus L. If he rejects the offer, player 1 gets 0 whereas player 2 is getting minus L. And likewise here also it will be CH minus X, X minus H, and if he rejects the offer, it is 0 minus H. So this is how the game looks like. In terms of the language of extensive game, it will be like that: two players, player 1 and 2. What are the terminal histories? It could be E, X and Z, where E is L or H. Okay. X belongs to 0 CL if E is equal to L. X belongs to the interval 0 CH if E is equal to H, right, and Z could be either yes or no. So it depends on the value of E, what value X will take in the subsequent stage in which player 1 moves. So these are the terminal histories, possible terminal histories. Now let us look at the player function. It is player 2 who moves first, then player 1 moves, and then player 2 moves for all X. And finally, preferences. What is the kind of preference that we are having here? These are given by this pair of functions. So in general, I can write the following, that U1 E X n is equal to U2 if n is the decision of player 2 in the last stage, then player 1 will get 0 everywhere. If his effort is L in the beginning and he is saying no in the last stage, his payoff is minus L. In this case it will be minus H. So these are the cases where n is reached. What happens, there is yes. So suppose player 1 is saying yes in the last, player 2 is saying yes in the last stage, whereas he has put a low level of effort in the first stage, then player 1 is getting CL minus X, okay. And in this case, what is player 2's payoff? He is getting X minus L, right. And likewise, if high effort has been put, then it is CH minus X. This is going to be X minus H. So this is how the payoffs are represented. Everyone likes to maximize the payoff of his, and these are the payoffs, and that is how the preferences are defined. Now, what is the subgame perfect Nash equilibrium here? It's not very difficult to see. After player 2 has decided in the first stage whether the effort is going to be low or high, the game becomes the familiar, this game or this game, both these games are the familiar ultimatum games. And we know that if we have an ultimatum game, then the subgame perfect equilibrium is that player 1 is going to offer 0 to player 2, that is x is equal to 0, and player 2's strategy is that accept any offer if x is greater than or equal to 0. So, this is going to be the subgame perfect equilibrium in each of these two subgames, whether we are starting with the history L or history H. The equilibrium is going to be the same, that 1 is going to offer 0 to player 2 and player 2 will accept that. But however, player 2's payoff from both these equilibria are different. In the first subgame, this subgame which is beginning after the history L, player 2's payoff in the equilibrium is minus L, whereas if the subgame is beginning after H, then player 2's payoff is minus H, and we know minus L is greater than minus H because H is greater than L, and therefore player 2 will have to choose between L and H, and by choosing L he is getting minus L, and by choosing H he is getting minus H in equilibrium, and since minus L is greater than minus H, so player 2 will choose L. So, the subgame perfect equilibrium in this case is the following: L is the action chosen by player 2 in the first stage. In the second stage, that is when player 1 is making an offer, he is going to make an offer x is equal to 0 to player 2, and what is the strategy of player 3 in the player 2 in the third stage? Accept any offer x which is greater than or equal to 0, and the equilibrium payoff of these two players are CL and 0, sorry not 0, minus L. So, here we are reaching basically this and this and this, where x is equal to 0. So, if I put x is equal to 0, it becomes CL comma minus L. So, this is the equilibrium payoff. Now, this might seem a little awkward because player 2, it could be argued that if he puts some effort, then the size of the pie could increase so much by a large amount that the player 1 could have also benefited by getting a high portion of the pie, and that high portion of the pie, large portion of pie, he could have shared with player 2, and which could have made player 2 go for high effort. But in equilibrium, what is happening is that in equilibrium player 2 is getting 0 here. So, there is no incentive for him to put high effort, and neither can player 1 convince him that look, if you choose high effort, if the size of the pie is so much high that I am going to share a part of that pie with you, because that is not going to be credible, because once H is chosen, the equilibrium is that player 1 is going to offer player 2 only 0, that is the equilibrium. So, this may seem a little inefficient kind of equilibrium that we are having here, that player 2 is always choosing a low effort level, and that is why the total size of the pie remains small. So, this is again one of the many examples where the equilibrium is not very efficient. Now, related to this ultimatum game, which is we have another game which is called the agenda control game. I am simply going to describe the game here and without doing an exercise. So, what is the story? The story could be told in the following way. Suppose there is a legislature which decides what policy the government will take, and the legislature, when implementing a policy, may appoint a committee. And the committee may recommend a particular policy. The legislature can do the following: either it can accept that policy, in which case the recommendation of the committee is accepted. On the other hand, the legislature can choose to reject the policy recommended by committee, in which case we in case of rejection we go back to the what is known as the status quo policy. So, suppose Y is the proposal by the committee, all right, and so this is the first stage where it is as if the player 1 is making a move and he is making an offer to player 2. Why is that offer? Player 2, that is in this case legislature, can either accept, in which case Y becomes the policy, or reject, in which case we are back to the status quo policy, the policy which was prevailing before. Let us call it as Y0. So, these are the cases, these are the things that people can do, that these two players can do. What about the preferences? Well, we are going to assume that these two players, legislature and committee, they have what is known as a single peaked symmetric preference. What does it mean? It means that you have a one dimension thing, variable, where you like, suppose this Y star, and if you are at Y star, that is best for you. The further you go from Y star, does not matter it is to the left or to the right, you are worse off in an increasing fashion. So, that is why it is symmetric. It does not matter whether you go to the left or to the right. So, this is called single peaked symmetric preference, and remember, this is the kind of preference we have seen in case of voting games also before, what we discussed in case of discussing the Nash equilibrium, application of Nash equilibrium in strategic games. There we talked about electoral competition, and there also we talked about this kind of preference pattern. Now, we are going to assume that favorite or this Y star for the legislature could be suppose 0, all right, and Y star, that is the favorite for the committee, is different. It is suppose equals to YC. YC is greater than 0, suppose. And so, this is the setting of the game. In the first stage, committee proposes something, some Y. In the second stage, legislature accepts or rejects, and that is where the game ends. So, that is how it looks like. We can have the following exercise from this sort of game. This is the exercise. Find the subgame perfect equilibrium of the game as a function of the status quo outcome Y0. So, whatever subgame perfect equilibrium outcome one finds out, it has to be expressed as a function of Y0, which is the status quo outcome. Show that for a range of values of Y0, an increase in the value of Y0 leads to a decrease in the value of the equilibrium outcome. So, it is like the following. I have Y0 here and YC here. So, these are the favorite position of the legislature and the committee. Y0 could be anywhere here. Okay. So, Y0 I do not know, it can be anywhere in this single dimension line, and I have to find out what are the subgame perfect equilibrium outcomes if y0 keeps on changing. So, that is the exercise. I am not going to solve this exercise, just to make you aware of what kind of questions can be asked from this setup. So, that is more or less it from the part of ultimatum games, or the, to be more precise, the setting of ultimatum games, because we have seen that we can go beyond ultimatum games and talk about other sorts of game which are related to ultimatum game, but not exactly the ultimatum game. The last topic we shall cover is what is known as Stackelberg model of duopoly. So, we are back to markets. If you remember, duopoly is a market where there are only two firms which are selling goods. What is special about Stackelberg model is that it is a variation over the Cournot model. What was Cournot model? There were firms, in case of a duopoly, there were two firms which were selling goods in the market. Simultaneously they were taking their decisions, and they were deciding on the quantity that they are going to produce, and in the market, given the demand function, in precisely the inverse demand function, the equilibrium price was getting determined, and therefore they were getting their payoffs or profits. In the Stackelberg model, instead of simultaneous actions by these two firms, firm 1 and firm 2, we are going to assume that decisions are being taken sequentially. So, player 1, maybe the firm 1, is moving first and deciding on the quantity of output that this firm is going to produce. So, Q1 happens first, the amount of output firm 1 is producing. Given the value of Q1, in the second stage, player 2, that is firm 2, decides how much he will produce. So, then Q2 is being decided, and therefore, we have Q1 and Q2, and therefore, we have the profits pi 1 and pi 2. So, that is where the game ends. So, it is a two-stage game, it is a sequential game, that is, it is an extensive game, where the first mover is firm 1 and second mover is firm 2, and there the game ends. So, what we want to look at is that in this changed environment, where the Cournot model has been changed a little bit, perturbed a little bit, what are the outcomes? Do the profits of the firms remain same, or they change? If they change, in what direction? Does the total output change? So, these are the questions that we want to ask. And what about the price? Does the equilibrium price also change? So, these are the questions that we want to ask in this Stackelberg model of duopoly. So, written the entire, if I want to write the entire thing in terms of the language of game theory, I have to specify four things. First, two firms are there. So, what are the terminal histories here? Sequences of the form Q1, Q2, where Qi is any non-negative number. Okay. So, first firm 1 decides what is the value of output that it is going to produce. then firm2 decides q2 and there the game ends. Player function, after the null history it is firm1 which is going to move, we shall denote it by 1. After firm1 has decided the output level, firm2 moves. So, this is P of q1 is equal to 2. Preferences. So, what is the thing that the two players want to maximize? Obviously, they want to maximize their payoff functions, and the payoff functions are nothing but the profit functions. So, how do I write that? Suppose I want to write the utility or the payoff or the the profit of the firm I, then it is output produced by that firm multiplied by the price. So, this Qi multiplied by PD, PD is the demand, inverse demand function. Remember previously I was using the notation P, not PD, but here I have P already, the player function. So, I am using a different notation as PD, the demand function, minus the cost which is given by CIQI. The cost of firm I is dependent on the output that it is producing. So, this is what each firm wants to maximize, where PD is given by this one, this function is the inverse demand function. Because price is expressed as a function of the total quantity. So, this is what the players want to maximize. So, what is going to be the Nash subgame perfect equilibrium in this game, in this game of Stekelberg duopoly? So, like we have seen before, we have to start from the last subgame of length 1. So, here in terms of game 3, what is happening is that here is firm 1 and who is deciding on q1, it is a continuous variable from 0 to infinity, and after he has decided q1, firm 2 moves and decides q2, and then the profits are obtained. So, profits are given by this. These are the profits of these two firms. So, this is how it looks like. Question is, how do we solve this game? So, what we do is to start with the subgame of length 1, which is this subgame, and find out what is the best response of player 2 given the value of q1. So, given q1, 2 maximizes u2 and decides on q2, which we shall write as b2 of q1, because as q1 will go on changing for different values of q1, the optimal value of q2 will go on changing also. So, it is a function of q1, q2, the optimal q2 is a function of q1. So, let us write it as q2 star. This is the optimal thing that player 2 is choosing, and let us suppose let q2 star is unique for every q1. So, for every value of q1 there is a unique value of q2 which maximizes u2, the payoff of player 2. Now, this is the optimal strategy of player 2 for every sub game, for every possible sub game. Remember, there are infinite number of sub games. For each value of q1 there is a different sub game. Now, given this optimal action of player 2 in each of these sub games, player 1 has to decide what q1 he is going to produce, which maximizes his profit. So, in sub game of length 2, player 1 maximizes u1. Now, I know u1 is a function of q1 and q2. In this case, it is a function of just q1 because q2 is given by this. And doing this, maximizing this, he will get a unique value of q1. Suppose this is called q1 star. All right. So, the subgame perfect equilibrium will be the following, that in period 1, player 1, that is firm 1, will choose q1 star, okay, which maximizes this function u1, which is a function of q1 and b2 q1, and in stage 2 the output that firm 2 will choose is given by nothing but this. So, this is the going to be the terminal history of in the subgame perfect equilibrium of this game. And after q1 star has been chosen, q2 star, that is b2 q1 star is chosen, we are going to have the profits which are going to be earned by these two firms. So, this is going to be the general structure of the subgame perfect equilibrium. So, this is the general setting of the subgame perfect equilibrium of this game and the subgame perfect equilibrium. What we are going to do now is to take up a specific set of functions, just as we had done in case of Cournot equilibrium, and see how this equilibrium is compared with the Cournot equilibrium. So, we are going to take the following functions, specific functions. Suppose Pt is given by alpha minus q, like before, where q is less than or equal to alpha is equal to 0 if q is greater than alpha. So, this is the inverse demand function. It gives me the equilibrium price for different values of total output in the market. Q is the summation of q, small q1 and small q2. And we are going to assume the following cost function. This is going to be the cost function where C is positive, alpha is greater than C, and which is positive. This is an assumption we are going to maintain. Now, with this setting, what is the profit function of each firm? So, suppose I am writing the profit function of firm 2. So, this is the profit function of firm 2. Likewise, the profit function of firm 1 will be the following. This is going to be the profit function of firm 1. And we have, as we have just said, how do we solve for the subgame perfect equilibrium of this game? we look at the best response function of firm 2 given the value of Q1. So, given firm 1 has produced a value of Q1, firm 2 will maximize its profit in the subgame of length 1 and decide on the optimal Q2. So, it is going to maximize pi 2, which is a function of Q1 and Q2 subject to Q2. And this is something which we have done before. We have found out the best response functions of each of the firms when we discussed the Cournot duopoly model, and we have seen that the best response of firm 2 is given by this was given by half alpha minus C minus Q1 if Q1 is less than equal to alpha minus C, equal to 0 if Q1 is greater than alpha minus C. So, I am not going to derive that this best response function. It is very easy to derive, but since we have already derived this in previous lectures, so this is we know as the best response function. Now, since this is the best response function of firm 2, what firm 1 will decide is that right at the beginning of the game, he will take this as given and maximize its profit, its own profit. So, maximize, I am writing pi 1, which is nothing but U1 subject to Q1 . So, basically in terms of our specific function, it is the following: maximize Q1 multiplied by alpha minus this function, which is half of alpha minus C minus Q1 minus 2 Q1 and so this is going to be maximized by the first firm with with respect to Q1, and if it is maximized, then we shall get the following value of Q1 from the first order condition. We shall get the following value of Q1, which we are writing as Q1 star as alpha minus C divided by 2. So, this is going to be the equilibrium value of firm 1's output, and given Q2 star, which is B2 Q1, I know the value of firm 2's output, half of alpha minus C minus alpha minus C divided by 2, it is going to be alpha minus C divided by 4. So, these are the equilibrium outputs at the of these two firms in the subgame perfect equilibrium. If we want to compare this with the Cournot equilibrium under similar assumptions, similar functional forms, there both the firms were producing the same level of output, and it was given by alpha minus C divided by 3. All right. Now, we see that compared to the Cournot equilibrium, in this subgame perfect equilibrium in the Stekelberg model, firm 1 is producing more output and firm 2 is producing less output. So, that is one conclusion. What about the profits? in the Cournot equilibrium, what were the profits? It was alpha minus c whole square divided by 9. Okay. So, this is something which we have done before, which you have seen before, whereas here firm 1's profit, if we plug this Q1 star and Q2 star in firm 1's profit, we shall get the following expression: alpha minus c whole square divided by 8, and similarly firm 2's profit will turn out to be alpha minus c whole square divided by 16, which means that compared to the Cournot model, where there was a symmetry, both the firms were taking the action simultaneously, there was no first mover or second mover. Firm 1's profit has gone up from alpha minus c whole square divided by 9, it has gone up to alpha minus c whole square divided by 8, whereas firm 2's profit has gone down from alpha minus c whole square divided by 9, it has gone down to alpha minus c whole square divided by 16. So, what it basically means is that firm 1, by deciding its own output in the beginning of the game, is having some advantage over firm 2 compared to the case where they were taking their actions simultaneously, and this is what is known as the first mover advantage. The player who is going to move first is getting some advantage because he can see that what is the optimal action of the second player in the stage 2, and taking that into consideration, he maximizes his own profit. This advantage is denied to the other player. So, this is how it looks like. Can we show this story, this comparison between the Cournot equilibrium and the Stekelberg equilibrium in terms of a diagram? And we can, the diagram will look like the following. This is a familiar diagram which you have seen before. This is the best response function of firm 1, and this is the best response function of firm 2, and then we draw the what is known as the isoprofit curves or the equal profit curves. We know this is the point of Cournot equilibrium. So, let us call it Q1 star and Q2 star. This point is suppose C. Now, we have seen this before, that we can draw what are known as isoprofit curves or equal profit curves of both these firms. Suppose I want to draw the isoprofit curves of firm 1. So, they will look like the following. It is a concave curve, and the point where it is meeting the or intersecting the best response function of firm 1, the curve is having a slope of 0. There are infinite number of such curves. What I claim is that C is the point of Cournot equilibrium where the best response functions are intersecting with each other, and this point, let us call it S, is the point of Stekelberg equilibrium. What is the characteristic of this point? This is the B2Q1 line, the best response function of firm 2 with respect to different values of Q1, right, this line, and then we have this horizontal portion, and this vertical portion and this downward sloping is the B1 line. The characteristic of S is that at S, a particular isoprofit curve of firm 1 is having a tangency point with B2. So what is happening is that at the point S, firm 2 is on his best response function. So given Q1, he is doing his best. At the same time, firm 1 is maximizing his profit, taking into consideration that firm 2 will be on his best response function. So this is nothing but the Stekelberg equilibrium. Firm 1 knows that firm 2 will be on his best response function. He will be producing on B2. Given this information, given this knowledge, firm 1 is maximizing profit. And how can he maximize his profit? By choosing a isoprofit curve or equal profit curve which is closest to the horizontal axis. And a isoprofit curve can be closest to the horizontal axis. At the same time, I can have a point on the best response function of firm 2 if I have a tangency of the isoprofit curve with the best response function, and that is how S is defined. So, that is why we are saying that S is the Stekelberg equilibrium. So, from S I can draw these two perpendiculars. Let us call it Q1 dashed and Q2 dashed. So, Q1 star is the Cournot equilibrium, okay, Cournot-Nash equilibrium, and Q1 dashed, Q2 dashed is the Stekelberg subgame perfect equilibrium. So, one can from the diagram also it becomes very clear as to what is happening to the output level of each firm and what is happening to the profits also. Firstly, we can see that firm 1's output has gone up, which is confirmed by our calculation here. It had gone up from this to this. Firm 2's output has gone down from Q2 star to Q2 dashed. This is also confirmed from the movement from this to this. Whatever the profits, again the profits are easy to see that the profits of firm 1 have gone up because closer the isoprofit curves to the horizontal axis, they denote higher level of profits, and this profit curve which is passing through C is farther away from the horizontal axis, whereas the curve which is passing through S is nearer to the horizontal axis, which means firm 1's profit has gone up. Similarly, if I had drawn the isoprofit curves of firm 2, I am not doing that because it will be very messy. I can see that the isoprofit curve of firm 2 which passes through S, all right, are further away from the vertical axis than the isoprofit curve which passes through C. So, at S the firm 2 is earning less amount of profit than it was earning in the Cournot-Nash equilibrium. So, these are some of the conclusions that we can draw from this exercise, that in the Stekelberg equilibrium firm 1's profit goes up, its output goes up, whereas firm 2's profit and output both go down. Is this cost function that we had assumed, remember we assumed a very simple kind of cost function, linear cost function, crucial for this result? In other words, if I had assumed a different kind of cost function, suppose quadratic cost function, would the result still hold? Suppose I had Ci Qi is equal to Qi square, would the same result hold? Same result hold, I mean in the Stekelberg compared to the Cournot model, the first mover has more profit and more output, and second mover has less profit and less output. This could be one exercise one can do as a homework, that even if we take quadratic cost functions, the same result holds, that the first mover is having some advantage over the second mover because he can guess what the best response of the second mover is going to be in the second stage and plan accordingly and raise his or her profits. So, this is what it is, the Cournot, the Stekelberg model in comparison to Cournot model. Before we end this lecture, let me recapitulate what we have briefly done in this course. What we have done is that we have basically covered, in terms of themes, 3 topics. One is the very idea of Nash equilibrium in strategic games where the actions are taken simultaneously. We have looked at the definition, we have looked at the various facets of that Nash equilibrium, we have defined what are known as dominant actions. Then we looked at what are the applications, well known applications of Nash equilibrium in different real life situations. For example, we have looked at markets and there were basically 2 models of markets that we have looked at, Cournot model and Bartra model. We have also looked at the application of Nash equilibrium in elections, how we can analyze elections in terms of the idea of Nash equilibrium. We have looked at, for example, auctions, which is again related to what is known as auction theory, and we have also looked at other things like how laws can be formed which could be efficient by using the idea of Nash equilibrium. The second topic that we have basically covered is the case of mixed strategy Nash equilibria, where it is assumed that players can randomize their actions. It is possible that players do not take their actions for sure, but take each action with some probability which could be less than 1. So there is some uncertainty regarding what action a particular player will take. In that case also we have seen that the idea of Nash equilibrium gets generalized, and an important result in that theme is that for every game where the number of actions of the players are finite, a Nash equilibrium surely exists. In terms of mixed strategy, a Nash equilibrium will surely exist. And then lastly, we have looked at the last theme, which is the case of extensive games, where the actions are taken not simultaneously, but in stage by stage, one by one after another. So in this case of sequential actions taking, also we have seen that the idea of Nash equilibrium could be applied, but there is a problem of interpretation of that idea. The idea of Nash equilibrium in the case of sequential game is not very robust. So we have refined the idea and we have talked about what is known as a subgame perfect equilibrium. We have looked at different aspects of subgame perfect equilibrium, how it could be found out by a convenient method called the backward induction, and we have looked at some applications of this subgame perfect equilibrium in real life. So that is the end of this course. I hope you have benefited from this course. Thank you. This is exercise for lecture 40. In Stekelberg's duopoly market with constant unit cost and linear demand function, do the firms produce same level of output? Which firm earns the higher profit? So this is a question about Stekelberg's duopoly model. If we remember, the linear demand function, or rather the inverse demand function, was given by this. And we know alpha is greater than C, C is greater than 0, where Ci, Qi is small c, the cost function. In this case, the firm 1, the leader, produces more output.
it is given by Q1 alpha minus C divided by 2. Firm 2, the follower produces less output given by alpha minus C divided by 4. Okay. So, there are differences in output levels. Which firm earns higher profit? Profit, this is question number 1. Profit of firm 1 is given by alpha minus C whole square divided by 8. Profit of firm 2 to alpha minus C divided by whole square divided by 16. And the reason why this is happening, why there are differences in output level and profit level, is the following: that here firm 1, here he is sitting and he is deciding Q1, and then firm 2 is deciding Q2, and after Q1 and Q2 are decided, we are getting this pi 1 and pi 2. These are the payoffs of the two firms. So, for firm 2, he is going to play according to the best response function, which is given by Q2 is equal to alpha minus C minus Q1 divided by 1. But this is known by firm 1. This is anticipated, let us say, by firm 1. So, he maximizes, firm 1 maximizes says pi 1, which is a function of Q1 Q2, but which basically turns out to be a function of Q1 only, and that gives him the output this. So, here player 1, that is the firm 1, has some advantage because he can anticipate what is the reaction of firm 2, and therefore, he earns more profit also and produces more profit, as opposed produces more output. In Stekelberg's model, suppose the cost function of each firm is a square of its own output level. What are the equilibrium output levels of two firms? So, here I have Qi square. So, the problem remains more or less the same. Here also, first we go through backward induction, first maximize pi 2, which is given by this. With respect to Q2, so this will give us Q2 1/4 of alpha minus Q1, let us call it 1. And so, now we are going back and going to the beginning of the game and maximizing pi 1, all right. Using 1, we get pi 1, sorry, Q1 is given by 3/14 alpha, and putting it in 1, we get Q2, which is given by 11/56 alpha, and there will be differences in the profit level also. Firm 1 will earn more profit, firm 2 will earn less profit. So, the sort of qualitative result we got for constant unit cost remains the same even if we have quadratic cost of production, that the firm 1 is producing more, earning more profit, firm 2 is producing less, earning less profit. Thank you.